Hey guys, with EVO fast approaching, this feels like a good opportunity to demo a quick joystick build for anyone wanting to put something new together for the event. I feature a lot of all-button controller content on this channel, but this video will be geared around how to assemble a traditional levered fight stick. And let me say that these things come together so easily, before long you'll have more than you know what to do with. But even if you've never knocked one out yourself, I'll walk you through what you need to order and how to assemble. I can't promise you'll get out of pools with your shiny new toy, but a nice fight stick will surely soften that 0-2 sting should the worst happen. Let's start with our part list. Feel free to pause to make sure you get it all, but I'll talk about the different components as they arise and give you a price breakdown at the end. It also depends on where you're from in the world, but if you're located in the US, some of the bigger arcade part suppliers are Focus Attack, Arcade Shock, and Paradise Arcade, so you can start your part search with those. Then, to put one of these together, you'll need a screwdriver, some Allen wrenches, and then usually a wrench or small socket set to get that lever mounted. Before we get ahead of ourselves though, I like to begin in the planning stage and decide first on the case and theme. By settling on those elements first, it will make the rest of the project easier. As you brainstorm different fight stick aesthetics, consider what shapes, colors, and art would lend themselves well to your ideas. That way, you may be able to grab some enclosures with some fun angles to sell a different aesthetic, or even make use of a custom layout better suited for your posture and build. Now, I'm keeping the build in this video pretty simple as a good baseline, but you can really swing hard on some of these elements to dial in a crazy theme. Check out our fight sticks for some great inspiration from community members. Now, if you have the skills and tools, you can make your own enclosure. Counterintuitively, a lot of the money in a build can be tied up in a wild case. If you don't want to make your own, here's a quick list of case vendors to help you find what you need. I have this spare 18-inch black all fight sticks case hanging out in my back room of fight stick wares, so it's going to serve for this video. Maybe it would have been better with some colored powder coating, but this represents a good standard and is a model fairly easy to acquire for anyone just following along at home. But before you place your own order, something else to consider is your layout. This one is a more traditional A-button affair. However, it does deviate from a Vuelix layout and is called Noir. But there are some newer layouts which may work even better for certain games, so it's good to be mindful about what game you plan on playing the most. For example, the Six God layout was designed around Street Fighter 6 sensibilities with drive functions positioned around the thumb. I've also built out larger cases with custom split layouts to give bigger users more room. The sky's the limit. If this is your first build, then it's more than fine to start with something like a Vuelix just to see how it feels and establish your own baseline. For what it's worth, I like the Astro City Player 2 layout quite a lot in these joystick builds. Still, it's good to know our layout and case size so we know how to incorporate the theme before we get too far along. So now that those elements are finalized and we have ourselves a Noir 18-inch AFS case, we can look to the art and the colors. I want a good plan, so I only have to order a single time and save on shipping if I can help it. To get started on the design, I just have to download the appropriate PSD file for this specific case and start to work. I would say that Focus Attack has at least 90% of the fight sticks you're likely to encounter, so I'm fairly optimistic that you'll be able to find the layout you're looking for there. If you've got some Photoshop skills, you can fab up something yourself, or you can commission a graphic artist. For some builds, I like to go full custom and commission something original. In my example here, I'm going away from traditional FGC vibes to something more in line with 80s pop culture. I think an old school Little Shop of Horrors theme could be fun, so I'm going to pick a couple elements from that film to convey that idea. I think I want the smaller coffee can version of the Audrey 2 plant, and then also the monstrous grown-up version. I'd rather it not be overly cluttered, so I'm going to limit it to just a couple of main elements. So now we just need a couple of colors to help it pop. Green is obviously already a main component to the plant, so I think purple will accent that really well. Then, since we have our idea and our color scheme, it's easier to pick certain components like the buttons and the joystick ball top. Then I sent off my sketches to have my artist buddy creepsnbabes elevate them in his style. I've worked with him a lot on my builds over the years, and he's always game to help me out. Here is his polished version of my concept. I'll add it to my cart to be printed. One note is that you'll also need plexi if you're using artwork, so make sure you have one with the appropriate dimensions. You can usually buy those on Focus Attack when you order the print as well. And now it's time to start picking out the rest of our components. For buttons, I really like Crown 202s and even the Sumitsu Kikyo for some vibrant colors, but this time around I'm going with a different brand just because I like variety and this particular shade of purple, which will work well with our theme. If you have no context or prior experience though, Sanwa is generally the inoffensive go-to brand. Just make sure you get the correct size. Face buttons are typically 30mm. Aux buttons for your options are usually 24mm, but it's going to depend on your enclosure, so you'll need to double check. 3 is the bare minimum of aux buttons, but 6 allows for more training room features, and I'm all about more options, so we're going to go with that. Most buttons have 2 male terminal prongs and function identically, so grab whatever feels the best to you. I have an older video of sound comparisons here if you need help deciding. Now we can move on to the lever. Typically, if you play more 2D fighters like Street Fighter, KOF, or anime fighters, Japanese-style levers like Sanwa or Famitsu models seem to be more frequently recommended in these joystick builds. On the flip side, if you're more of a 3D fighting game enthusiast, then the usual rule of thumb suggests a Korean-style lever as more optimal. Still, both can be used across both subgenres, so obviously pick whatever joystick feels the best to you. The one thing to be aware of is that some cases may be too thin to accommodate older American-style levers, so double check that element before ordering. If this is your first build, then a Sanwa JLF or their new JLX iteration is probably home base. Whatever you get, make sure you have a joystick mounting plate if it doesn't come with one. Now, I'm a huge Fightstick part snob, so I would be going with one of these Sanjux V3 levers or their premium edition counterparts if I wasn't trying to make sure this video had the broadest appeal. But I'm not going to install the V3 here for a few reasons. 1, they are harder to acquire than Sanwa since a lot of the usual part distributors I mentioned at the beginning just don't carry them. 2, they are considerably more expensive than a base Sanwa offering. And 3, I want you to note the way the switches sit and the absence of a 5-pin connection. That means we have to wire it a bit differently, or invest in something like a Shuriken or similar appropriate switch plate to make the 5-pin connection play nicer with our wiring harness. I say all this for the sake of the Tekken players. Most Korean style levers function like this, so if you choose a lever from that category, be aware that you will have to hook it up in a slightly different way than shown here today. So for this video, I've elected to keep it simpler for anyone trying to get their own Fightstick together and just use the Sanwa model. This is also a good time to mention that if I plan to take this particular stick to events or routinely travel with it, that I would definitely install a Quick Link or EX Groove joystick shaft. Being able to detach the lever to make it flush with the case makes travel so much easier. I like them a lot and they install easily on many levers. You can also get shaft covers and dust covers in various colors to keep your stick cleaner and add an additional pop of color to your build. And speaking of giving it an extra pop, one of the coolest touches you can integrate into a build is a custom ball top. I used my guy Xanibunib from Mordor Gaming in a previous build I did for Meat Canyon, so I knew that he'd be game for this project. Now, I didn't need burrowing maggots this time around, but I knew that he could help elevate this concept. So, after a bit of back and forth, he sent me this, a beautiful little hand-painted Audrey 2 cast in resin. All button controllers may have a bit more precision, but they are forced to lose out on so many potential style points by omitting the ball top. Now that we have our buttons and lever, it's time to look at the board. Think of this element as the brains of your stick. So just ask yourself what systems absolutely require compatibility. Most any board will work on a PC, so you're a bit off the hook if this is the only system that you need. For this build, I want the most bang for my buck with the most compatible systems for the least amount of money. And because most major tourneys currently run PS5s, I want to make sure this is compatible with those. So I am selecting an advanced breakout board with a pass-through. With a GP2040CE firmware, this is compatible with PC, PS3, PS4, Nintendo Switch, Steam Deck, Mister, and Android. And then, with the appropriate dongle inserted in this pass-through slot, you can get even more going. I'm using a Magic Boots V1.1 dongle and inserting it here to make sure I can play PS5. There are also Xbox equivalent dongles if you'd rather go that route. I like this board because it is inexpensive, usually around $20 or less. Then the appropriate dongle is around $30. That means you get current gen play compatibility for around $50. So as I said, you can buy your own base PCB from a variety of vendors for around $20, but all the files are free on GitHub. That means that you can use an assembly service and have them cut you out a slew of PCBs. I went with PCBWay for this particular board. They did a nice job, and this is definitely a good option if you want more than a handful of these things. After all, you never know when you'll need to build another Fightstick on the fly, so I like to be well stocked. Okay, so now we need our wiring. You can wire directly to the screw terminal block on certain PCBs, or what's even easier, just make use of the 20-pin expansion here. You can make your own wiring harnesses from 0.110 inch wires with female quick disconnects at the end to stub into the male terminals of your buttons. But for $12, I like these pre-made ones with the daisy chain grounds quite a bit. They also come with that 5-pin connector to link to your joystick, as well as 3 additional aux functions, start, select, and mode. I'll also use a 4-pin L3R3 touchpad button harness for more training room options. It stubs into the boards here. If you want a detachable cable, and you do, a new trick can serve that role. When you order these, they look backward for our purposes. So just unscrew it all, turn it around, put it back together, and then just screw it in. You can also use a rubber boot or a 3D printed surround for a bit more protection. I usually opt for one of these. So now that you have a cool theme and all your parts have arrived, let's put this thing together. Place your buttons through the open holes. I like to orient all the prongs the same direction to make the wiring slightly easier and cleaner. If you use snap-in buttons, they should snap right in. If you use screw-in buttons, just tighten them down. Put your art and plexi down, and make sure not to over-tighten the plexi. Mount the joystick in there with screws. The ball top has to be removed to get the shaft through. We can just tighten it down at the end of the build with an Allen wrench though. When you mount the lever in there, be aware of which direction the 5-pin connector comes out. Based on its orientation, it will change your up, down, left, right inputs. It usually goes like this, but even if you screw up and pick a wrong direction and mount your lever, it's not the end of the world. Instead of breaking down the stick to remove the joystick and reorient that way, you can pop the gate right here and then just rotate the joystick PCB to another direction. The wiring harness connects here to your PCB. Hold against the other side of the buttons and press the quick disconnects over the button prongs firmly. The wires on these harnesses are all color coordinated, and if you look, the lengths of the wire are not uniform. They are cut to a line side by side in a row. Your top ones, typically your punches, are colored as such. On this particular harness, 1P is blue, 2P is red, 3P is gray, and 4P is purple. And your bottom ones, typically your kicks, are colored like so. 1K is orange, 2K is yellow, 3K is green, and 4K is black. The extra aux function cable plugs into this slot, and then you can wire those extra R3, L3 touchpad buttons to those 3 additional aux buttons. The aux buttons daisy chain and connect just like the rest of the buttons. plug in the PCB and connect it to your new trick. Worth noting here is that some PCBs have a USB Type-B connection, but these boards here have a USB Type-C connection. Both work fine, but you need to know beforehand so you can order the correct cable to connect back to the new trick. There are also other types of connections you can use outside of a traditional new trick, but they all serve the same function. And though it's not necessary, you can also install tournament lockout switches to guarantee you won't be DQ'd with an accidental game pause button press. I typically don't do this on most of my builds, however. We need this Magic Boost V1.1 for PS5 play. The light should glow a faint blue on your dongle to let you know it's working. Now you can wipe it down and add a few finishing touches. Then we just plug it into your preferred system and it's game time. So to check your PCB, hold down S2, usually your start button, and plug it into your PC. From there, you can enter this into your URL bar and up will come a web configurator tool. Then you can make sure you have the latest version of the firmware, change SOCD modes, enable PS5 settings, set up different profiles, and a slew of other fun stuff. Once you're happy, just press save. I hope you found this tutorial helpful and you're all able to make the perfect controller for you. Quick question before we finish. Are you guys going to EVO? If so, and you happen to be bringing a wild stick or all button controller with you, would you mind if I flagged you down to look at it and talk shop for a future video? Let me know in the comments. And if you're hungry for more Fightstick content, stay tuned to this channel. Anyway, thanks to PCBWay for the video sponsor, and thanks to you for watching. I really appreciate it. Support your locals, and I'll see you next time.